Alright, what's going on everyone? So what I have for you today is another potential Vue interview challenge, and the challenge is going to be creating a simple note-taking application. Alright, now if you do want to give this challenge a try yourself, which I do recommend, I'll leave a link down below in the description to this challenge page that'll have an outline for the challenge itself, and you can find all the challenges here on this challenge tab. Okay? This is going to be an intermediate challenge. It's going to be a little bit harder than the previous one we did, and we're going to be asked to create a simple note-taking application that will save the content automatically after you stop typing. Now, what I've done here is I've created what I think is going to be a pretty good outline for all the things that we want to be able to do inside of this note-taking application, and this could change as I have not yet actually built this out, but these are things that I've come up with in my head that I think makes sense for the actual challenge itself. Alright, the first thing we'll want to do is implement a rich text editor into our application, and what I found worked best for Vue 3 was VueQuill. Now, VueQuill is not really ready for production yet, so I wouldn't recommend using it in something, that's going to be in production, but for something like this challenge, it's going to work great. But just wanted to mention that. Okay. Now, the second thing we'll want to do is output the actual text editor's content into our application, sort of like a preview. Then we'll also want to be able to remove the actual rich text editor content from the text editor itself. And the final thing we'll want to do is actually save the text editor content to local storage after we stop typing for a fixed amount of time. So that way, if we refresh the application, we'll see our text editor content. We don't have to worry about clicking the save button. Now, you don't need to focus on the style of this application too much. I'm not going to in this video. We just want to focus on the functionality. However, you can feel free to work back and improve the UI of this application later. Now, if you do want to take this a step further, you can turn this into a full Node-RED application using local storage or even something like Firebase. And if you would like to see something like that here on the channel, just be sure to drop a like on this video and let me know down below in the comments. So that is going to be the challenge we're going to be attempting, so let's get started. Okay, here in VS Code, I have a Vue 3 project open, which is actually the repository for all the Vue challenges. And you can find those completed challenges here inside of the challenges folder. Now, for this challenge, we'll be using the file challenge2.vue, which is currently what I have open right here, which is, empty for the moment. And how this works is if we head to our router folder, we have our index.js. I just created separate routes for each one of the challenges that we have. All right, so let's close that out. Now, the first thing that we want to do is if we head back over to our outline is we need to implement a rich text editor into our application. And we're going to be using VueQuill for this. So if we head over to VueQuill, we can select on Get Started. And right off the bat here, we have this warning in which, like I mentioned, it's not recommended to use this for anything serious yet, as there could be some breaking changes over time. With that out of the way, we can head over to the installation tab. And then what we want to do is copy this snippet right here to install VueQuill with npm. And then we'll open up our terminal. And within the Vue Challenges folder, we want to install this into our project here. And there we go. Okay, so let's close out our terminal. Now back inside of the docs here, we can head over to usage, and we have in the browser, which we don't want. I haven't actually used VueQuill yet in some time, at least in Vue 3. Yeah, we want local registration. So you can see here, we just want to import the Quill editor component and then our theme of choice. So I believe there's two themes we can use. Let's see here. So we have the snow and then the bubble. Now, although I think the bubble looks a little bit more modern for the sake of simplicity, I think we'll just opt to use the snow, but you can use whatever theme that you choose. So we'll just keep it very basic and, maybe we can change it later, but I think this will work fine. So let's copy these two lines of code here. Back in our component, let's paste that in, and then we just want to grab the Quill editor component, and then it's going to have a theme of prop, or oh wait, did I say that wrong? It's going to have a prop of theme, which will set that to snow. Okay, I believe that's all we have to do. So now if we open up our terminal once again, we can spin up the local development server with npm run dev, open this up. And let's see here. Oh, we got to go to the route of challenge 2. And there we go. As you can see, we have now implemented the rich text editor. Just to test things out, let's do a test. So we'll say just a test. So we can type, that's good. And we can also bold, italicize, and underline. So it appears that this is working as it should. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to have a preview of this content also inside of the application. So my vision here is pretty simple. We'll just have the rich text editor on the left, and then we'll have the preview on the right. Okay, so let's begin to lay that out. And inside of our template here, let's begin with the markup. So what I think we'll do is we'll wrap the Quill editor inside of a div. And then let's see, we can probably just, let's look at the naming convention here for this. Let's see if they give it anything special. So they call it QL toolbar and then QL container, and then they have a QL editor. Maybe we can just say, class name doesn't really matter, but I like to make it pretty specific to what I'm targeting. So we'll say QL and we'll do editor and wrap like that. And then we'll have a div with the class. We'll do preview wrap, and then we'll have an H2. We'll have this say preview, and then we can just have another div with the class of preview like this, and then we'll have our actual preview of the Quill editor content inside of here. So we'll just say for now, this is a preview. All right, so right now that's going to look quite bad. It's not really formatted how we want it. We can also give this div wrapping the entire thing. Let's say a class of container, and then inside of our style tag, let's target these. We'll say container, we'll give it a max width of, let's say, like 1440 pixels, and then a margin of 0 and auto to center everything up. Okay, so you're not going to see anything really different there. And then we also, let's display this as flex. And then we're going to have two flex children. We have the QL editor wrap and then our preview wrap. We'll have some spacing between those two. We'll say 40 pixels. That should be good. And then we want it defaulting to a row. We want them side by side. So I think that's about it. Maybe we'll add some spacing to the top and bottom and the left and right for this container. So do padding 100 pixels and maybe 16 should be fine. And then if we look at it now, okay. So the one issue we have is that these flex children are not taking up the full space available in this container. And what we want to do is have each one take up half of the space in the container. And we can do that with a property called flex. So what we'll do is we'll target the QL editor wrap. And we want to do a shared selector here. So we'll say preview wrap, and we can pass it a property of flex and the value of 1. And that should make them take up equal amounts of space here inside of this flex container. Let's get out of this real quick. Now, one thing we have an issue, or not an issue, but the next thing we need to tackle is the actual preview itself. So currently, if we type in here, this is not actually a preview, it's just some static content. So we want to take the content from here and output it here. What I think we can do is I've used Quill Editor in the past, but it was in Vue 2. I believe we can just do a vModel on a variable and do a two-way bind to it, and then we can output it here inside of the preview itself. And if I do recall, I believe Quill Editor also comes in the form of HTML, what it outputs. So we could probably use the VHTML directive to format the markup for us. We'll create a new variable. We'll call this Quill content, and we'll set this equal to a new ref with the initial value of an empty string. And then we can do a vModel here, and we'll set this equal to the Quill content like this. And then just for now, we'll not use the VHTML attribute. We'll just output this entire variable inside of this div. So we'll say Quill content like that. Okay, now I think that should be good. Let's give this a try so we can inspect this here, and let's also open up the Vue Dev Tools. We want to show that we're able to, use these and utilize these correctly. These are really helpful in terms of, troubleshooting and testing things. So we can click on the challenge 2 component and we'll see our Quill content variable. So let's give this a try. This is a test. So right away, I'm not seeing anything here. And this is not updating. So obviously something might have changed with this version of Quill. And the best thing we can do is reference the documentation to try to resolve our issue. And where I would begin is going to be this prop section right here, because that is essentially what we're adding to our Quill editor component is props. And right here at the very beginning, I can see what our issue is. So the v model directive is accepting this prop on here of content, which is why currently the 2A binding is not working. Okay, so we'll need to add this to our v model. Let's scroll down here and see if anything else stands out. So we have the content prop, which is just going to be the contents for the editor. We have the content type, which the default is actually a delta. So that's interesting. So we'll need to change this to HTML as well. We wouldn't want a delta. And then enable read only. We can do a placeholder, which is a type of string. We see in the theme, and then so on and so forth here. So back in our project on the v model, we'll say content like this. And then what we also want to do is change the content type to HTML. Okay, so if we save that, hopefully this should output correctly. In our app, let's do a refresh here, and we'll say this is a test, and there we go. So as you can see inside of the Vue Dev Tools, this variable of Quill content is now being updated with the content from the actual editor. And we can see that here in our preview in the application. Now, currently, as you can see, it's literally just outputting the HTML as a string, and we don't obviously want that. We want it to be actually a paragraph tag with this as a test being outputted within that paragraph tag. And this is actually very easy to output markup using, or in Vue, using the vHTML directive. So let's remove this from the paragraph div. And very simply, all we want to do is define the vHTML directive, and then we want to just say the Quill content like this, and that should work. It should now output the actual markup inside of this div for us. So if we have paragraph tags, if we have, bold content, it should all be handled with this directive. Now, as you can see here, this is a test is showing up inside of a paragraph tag. So if I inspect this, as you can see, this is actually a paragraph tag. And if we wanted to add a space or a line break here, as you can see, we're going to have a new paragraph tag added. And we can say this is another test, and we can even do stuff like bolding this. We can make this a actual heading, and I believe that should change it into an H2, which it does. So we have full control over what this is going to output, so that is pretty cool. Okay, the next thing we'll want to handle is clearing out this content here from the rich text editor. So the only way we can do that now is if we highlight everything and just clear it out. So what we want to be able to do is have a button here and then have that clear this out instead of having to manually come in here and just, highlight it all and delete it. Let's work on implementing that. And to be honest, that seems quite simple. So we'd want to have a button here, right? And then just a function that would essentially just reset this variable back to an empty string. Let's give that a try. So let's create the function. So we'll say const, and we'll just say clear Quill content like that, and set this equal to an arrow function. And then what we want to do is target the Quill content dot value and set this equal to a empty string like this, right? Now for the button, since we have this container displayed as flex, if we put the button in there, it's going to put it into the row. What we'd probably want to do is, restructure our markup here. So let's create another div here and just say note, container maybe like that. And then we'll push this inside of that div. And then we could take the display and gap property off here and say note container, and then put these two properties back. And I believe that should not change much. Let's do a refresh here to make sure it's working. Okay, that's all good. Then we want to put our button here inside of the container, but outside of the note container. So we'll say @click, and then we just want to clear, let's just copy this to save some time, clear Quill content, and we'll just say clear Quill content like that. And we'll also add a little spacing. So what we can do is just add a margin on the top here of 40 pixels to separate the button, maybe like 20, not like 40. And there we go. If we click on clear Quill content, it works partially. So it clears the actual, let's see here, if we go to the Vue Dev Tools, it appears to clear the variable here, but you can see we still have this text inside of the editor. So if we click clear again, it removes it, but it's still staying here inside of the editor. So let's take a look at the Quill editor. So the props of, so we've seen earlier that I believe content is the contents for the editor. So if we say this is a test, so that is actually in there. But when we clear it, it clears it, but it's still staying within the editor itself. Maybe something else would have to clear that for us. Maybe we just can't, change the variable to an empty string. Maybe there's like a method. So here's methods. So we have get editor, get toolbar, get quill, get contents, set contents. That might be, so this sets the contents of the editor. This returns you the HTML. We have set HTML. So we are using HTML. So maybe we have to use this method here in order to clear the actual Quill content itself. So maybe that's the better way to do it. So let's give that a try. So that is on the Quill editor itself, right? So in order to access this inside of the script, we would need something called a ref, and we'll give this the name of Quill. So that way we can reference it inside of our script tag here, and then we want to define this. So I think what we'd want to say is, let's do const, and for the ref to work, if you haven't used refs before in Vue 3, the ref name here, or whatever we set this attribute equal to, has to be the same name as the variable in here in order for it to work. We'll say ref, and we just leave it empty like that. So that'll give us reference to this entire instance of the Quill editor. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And then what we can do is, let's say console.log, and we'll say quill.value. And let's try this out now. So inside of the console, let's just hit clear Quill content, and there we go. So we can see that we have all these different options here from the Quill editor itself. And we want the, let's see here, set HTML function. Let's actually set that. So we'll keep this for now, and we'll see that if we need both of these. So what we can say is quill.value.set HTML, and then we just want to pass in an empty string here because it takes in, I believe it said, the HTML as a parameter, which is just a string. So this essentially should work. So let's just get rid of this here now, and let's try this out. Let's say this is a test, and if we clear that out, there we go, it clears it from the editor. But now I'm wondering if we really need both of these here. So let's see if we remove this, if it still actually controls, it should control the value of this. We might only need the set HTML function here. So let's try this again. This is a test. If we clear it, okay, so that is the proper way to do it, by using this method here and not just taking a value and setting it equal to an empty string. Okay, the last thing that we need to tackle, which is also probably going to be the toughest part of this challenge, is when we stop typing inside of this Quill editor, we want to take the current content that's inside of it and save it to local storage automatically. We don't want to have to click a save button. We want to detect when we stop typing, and then we want to take that value and then send it over to local storage. Now, the reason why we want to do this is if we head over to the app and we say something like note 1, and we know we leave this and we maybe leave the app and come back. Well, if we do that, then the note is going to be gone, and we don't want to have that happen. When we come back to the application, we want to retrieve the note that we currently had in here before we left. Okay. My initial thought here is that we obviously need to detect when the content is changing, right? That's the first step. If we can't detect that, then we can't do anything else. So for that, let's head over to the documentation and let's look at the events that this library offers. So looks like they have like 7 or 8 of them here. So we have text change, we have selection change, which is when the selection changes. They have editor change when the text or selection change. So I'm not really sure what the difference between the selection changes and the text changes. And then they have another one here, which is update, which is triggered when the editor content changes, which I feel this would probably be the best one because it's referring to that content that we have stored. So I think this is what we would want. So let's give that a try. So we also have focus, blur, and yeah, so I think this one is going to be the best one. I think we could also use text change and maybe selection change or even editor change, but I think I'm going to go with this update one here. But you know, you could try out the other ones, but I think this one's the best fit for what we're doing. Let's say on here at update :content, which is the prop. Then we want to say, we'll create a function called save quill content, and then let's define that here. So we'll say const save quill content, and we'll set this equal to a new arrow function. And for now, let's just log out to the console working, just to see if this is actually what we want, right? So that should, every time it updates, it should fire this function. Okay, let's give this a try. Let's say this is a new value, and I believe that is working. So every time it updates, as you can see, the event is being fired here. Okay, so now that we have that, the next step to this is going to be taking the current value of the editor and saving it to local storage. Okay, so I think we have 2 different options. So I recall when we did the set HTML method, I believe there also was the get HTML method, right? Get HTML here. So that's going to return the full HTML contents of the editor. I think either one of these will work for what we're doing, but since we already have this variable here, I don't really see the need to use that method, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you actually should use that one, but we'll just give this a go by using the quill content, which is being binded to the editor here. I think that should work fine. Now what we want to do is we'll say local storage, and then we'll say set item. Then we'll give this item a name of quill content. And then whenever you want to set an item in local storage, you have to properly format it. So you say JSON.stringify, and then we pass in the quill content. Actually has to go inside of there. Quill content dot value, like that. Let's give this a try. Inside the app, let's clear out this, and we'll do this is a new value, and let's check out local storage. So we'll do local storage. So I see this is a new value, but I don't see the exclamation point. I wonder, so it doesn't seem like it's getting that last keystroke that it's saving. So for example, if I remove this and then we redo that, is it going to be, so then it has the exclamation point. So I wonder if this method actually isn't the right one. So let's try text change and see if that one maybe works better. So we'll do at text change here, and we'll try this again. So we'll save it, see if that actually maybe works better. I don't know. Value, and then let's log out that. Okay, that seems to work better. So that's giving us the actual full value inside of our local storage of, our item here. So that might be the way we want to go, is using the text change. We'll stick with that. Now, currently the issue we have is every time we type, we're saving this to local storage. And in this scenario, since we're not using an API, it really doesn't matter. It wouldn't be a huge deal. But if we were sending this over to a database, every time that we do a keystroke here, that API would be firing. So this could fire almost like 1,000 or 2,000 times and just create a abundance of requests. And we don't want that. Instead, we could use something called a debounce. And what a debounce does is, after a set amount of time that we can specify, then this local storage.set item would run. So currently it's running on every single time that it detects an update or a text change, where we only want this to fire perhaps after 1 second of us stopping our typing here. Okay, so let's see how we would implement that. Now, it's been a while since I've done one of these. I think the last time I did it, the best way to handle it was to create a new variable, and we'll call this set time out, and we'll set this equal to a new ref with the initial value of null, because we pretty much want to keep track of our set timeout inside of a variable here. And then what we want to do is wrap this local storage.set item inside of a set timeout method. So set timeout, this accepts a callback here. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a set timeout does, it's going to execute the code inside of here after the time that we specify. So let's just do 1,000 milliseconds here, which is a second. And then we'll just stick this local storage.set item inside of here. And what we want to do is we then want to take our set timeout variable here and set it equal to the set timeout method or function that we have. So we'll say const set timeout dot value, or no, we don't want to declare it again. We just want to say set timeout dot value is equal to this method right here. Then every time this function runs, we want to clear this timeout so that it only, because what's going to happen is every time we have a keystroke, this is going to run. So we want to clear that previous timeout every time that we have a keystroke or we detect a text change, until it doesn't detect a text change anymore, which at that point, then the set timeout will run after 1 second. To clear a timeout, I believe we need to say clear timeout, and then we want to pass in the set timeout dot value here. And I think that should work. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so let's give this a try. Is a test, and it's saying set timeout is not a function. So let's see what we did here. So set timeout dot value equals the set timeout method here. So that's right. Then we're saying clear timeout, and then we're saying set timeout dot value here. Okay, so what is the actual error we're getting? It's saying that set timeout is not a function. Okay, so I think the issue might be, after a few moments here of looking, is that I don't think we can actually call this variable set timeout. I think that's what the actual error we're getting is, because the variable name and the set timeout method may be colliding. I don't know. I could look like a total idiot here for not knowing this, but let's try changing this variable name to something just like timeout tracker, like that, and let's see if that works. So let's do a clear here, and we'll say this is a test, and we're not getting any errors. And let's do a local storage dot get item here, and then we'll say content, and there we go. So that does appear to be working. So just to show you this a little bit more clearly, let's go back in here, and in addition to setting this, let's also say console dot log, and we'll say fire, like this. So that's going to log out of the console fire after we stop typing after 1 second here. So let's see this. So let's do it again. This is a test, and there we go. So as you can see, we have now set it to where we stop typing after 1 second. Then we're going to save our content. Okay. Now, although we're storing our content inside of local storage, one more issue that we're going to have is, for example, if we do a refresh here, well, then we're no longer going to see this content inside of the text editor. So when we refresh the application, we'll want to populate the data from local storage here inside of the text editor. So let's see how we can handle that. So the first thing we'll do is just remove this console.log. We don't need this. So let's think about this for a second. So when we first load into the application, we want to check to see if we have a value inside of local storage. And thinking about this a little bit more, we should probably change this to session storage, because local storage will be too infrequent. I think session storage makes more sense for this. So just a quick little change there. When we load into this, page, we want to check to see if we have this value inside of session storage. So let's just first create a function to handle this, and then we'll just execute this function every time this page is loaded into. So we'll call this populate quill content, and so this is equal to a new arrow function like this. And pretty much what we want to do is, first off, we just want to check. Let's do this. We'll say const, let's do session data, and then we'll set this equal to. So let's actually get the data from session storage to see if it even exists, okay? So we'll say session storage dot get item, and we'll say quill content like this. Then we'll do an if check here, and we'll say if session data exists. Then what we want to do is we want to take that data and we want to set it to our quill content. Now remember, when we get data from session storage, we need to parse it. So we should be able to say, let's do quill content dot value is going to be equal to, we'll say JSON dot parse, and then we'll say session data like that. And then we just want to execute this function every time the application or this page is loaded. So I think that should work. We could probably make this function a little bit better, but I think what we have here for now is going to be fine. So let's give this a test. So if we do a refresh here, I don't know if we even have any, we don't have any data in session storage yet because we haven't actually used it. So this is a new value. And if we do a refresh here, as you can see, when we refresh the page, we now see this value being added, or it's being retrieved from session storage and then being set to the variable here of quill content, which is then shown here inside of the rich text editor. So I believe that is all working great now. So if we change this and say this is a new update, and then we refresh, as you can see, we are still going to see that content once we refresh the application. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this challenge. Now, we could probably do a little bit of organization with our code and even do some refactoring, but honestly, that isn't the objective of these challenges. The objective is to get something that is up and running that has the function that is desired. It doesn't necessarily matter how something looks as long as it works, in my opinion. And obviously, you want to have clean and organized code, but you can always do that once you have your desired functionality. All right, so hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you guys did, be sure to leave a like on it down below and consider subscribing if you are new here to the channel for more content like this. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.